health. He is a substantive voice on all matters relating to public health, and he's known for that substantive voice. His voice, when he speaks on these matters, adds weight, it adds value. He comes with a currency and a legitimacy that I am certain will further add value to this honorable chamber. And as the media asked me earlier this morning, and I said publicly as well, that the conversations in this place, to which he will add that voice, are very much that. Conversations coming from multiple different perspectives, drawn from different experiences, and using our respective different lenses to be able to shape public policy. And I want to welcome you to this honorable chamber. And equally, I would wish to welcome Senator Tate back to the Senate. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Senator Worrell.
Thank you, Mr. President. And I too, on behalf of the opposition, would like to welcome both senators to the chambers, and in particular, welcome back Senator Monique Tate. I would definitely have missed her contributions had she not been here, so I'm very happy to see her here. And I want to take this opportunity as well to commend former Senator Crystal Drakes for her outstanding contributions which she made in this chamber. I always look forward to listening to her very sober approach, especially on economic matters, as that is her area of expertise. And I do believe that we have not seen the last of former Senator Crystal Drakes. She is someone who is definitely committed to the development of Barbados, and I'm certain that we will hear more about her work and her accomplishments, and we may very well see her back in this place or in the other place sometime soon. I don't know if she has aspirations for the other place, but maybe here. But I think that we must as someone who has an interest in the development of this country, that is a possible alternative, but I'm not speaking for her. Mr. President, I also want to take this opportunity to welcome my neighbor, Senator Connell, who happened to have been my deputy head boy at the law school, and I think all right, deputy head boy at the law school, and all the other law school former law school students in here, you can give him a round of a thump for that. They asked for it, Mr. President. But I'm certain that Senator Connell will make a sterling contribution in this place, as he has already done in his professional career as a lecturer at the University of the West Indies, and also a medical professional. So I welcome him, and I'm glad to have you seated next to me, and I look forward to your contributions.
Senator Reverend Dr. Rogers. Reverend Canon Dr. Rogers.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. I too rise to lend my voice to welcome those who are coming into the Senate, but also firstly to thank Senator Dr. Crystal Drakes for her presentations and her presence in the Senate. She was my neighbor throughout my tenure here, first to my left in the opposition, and then to my right as an independent senator. And I believe we will miss her erudite presentations in this chamber, and I wish her all the best in her endeavors in the future. I wish to welcome back, well, I'm not sure I'm able to welcome back Senator Tate, because she was before I am, but we welcome Senator Tate back to the Senate, and we look forward to her bringing the wealth of her experience in the legal profession, especially in critiquing and analyzing the legislation before us. So we welcome you back. And I take this opportunity also to welcome Senator Dr. Connell, who would have messaged me several times after speeches in this Senate, encouraging me in some of the things that I would have said and so on. So it is really a pleasure to have him here. And I know he brings with him as well the wealth of his experience in his field, as he is highly recognized, as has been mentioned before, nationally, regionally, and internationally. And I have no doubt that these experiences will come to bear on his presentations here. But I wish to join Senator Worrell as well in acknowledging that yet another one from my alma mater is here with us. And that now changes the balance of the Senate, where almost 1/4 of the Senate comes from that illustrious institution in St. John, 5 out of 21. So we welcome you. There's only the illustrious institution in St. John, the Lodge School. Congratulations, Senator Connell, and we look forward to your presentations here. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you very much, Senator Reverend Canon Dr. Rogers. Senator, the Honorable Christopher Maynard.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I am not going to speak about schools. I will first of all like to also recognize Senator Drakes, and I will simply say we shall miss, and I'm sure that many other people also miss, the strength of her contributions. I am hoping that my senior colleague to my right will take up some of that work. I wish to welcome Senator Tate back to this new phase of Parliament for her. I don't know how long it will be for all of us, but that's a different topic for a different time. And I must welcome Senator Dr. Kenneth Connell, who is well known in medical circles for his work. I'm hoping that with his expertise and his influence at a university level, he will be able to make a difference from a wider public office and from a position of privilege to make a change in the health of our country. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Senator, the Honorable Christopher Maynard. Senator, the Honorable Lyndall Nurse.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just a few brief words. I want to say that it was, first of all, a pleasure having been able to sit as an independent senator alongside Senator Crystal Drakes, who I think was a top senator. Her presentations, in my view, were always top-notch, very professional, and she brought that level of debate and that, but still with a calm perspective to get over and to express her positions, and not backing down when challenged by maybe some other senator. And I know she's a young person, and I wish her well as she moves on in the other aspects of her life. It is not often, Mr. President, that you get to say almost like a farewell, but yet a welcome back to the same individual. I speak, of course, of Senator Monique Tate, who had resigned, but given the wisdom of our new president, he decided to reappoint her to the Senate. And she too has been very critical and very independent in her opinions whenever it was required. And I think she did make a exceptional contribution during her tenure in the Senate. And so I am pleased to be able to welcome her back for her additional contributions. And finally, Senator Dr. Connell, our new senator, I cannot claim to know him really outside of Parliament or in any other relationships or organizations, but I seem to recall that his public presence became more prominent, I believe, during COVID. And you then began to see him more often on television, educating the general public about issues in public health. And I really enjoyed listening to them. I was educated, and I know that he will continue to lend his knowledge and his wisdom, particularly when debates in this Honorable Senate arise surrounding issues of public health and other areas in which he may have a basic interest. And so I am pleased to join with my other independent senators in welcoming Dr. Connell, and I look forward to his contributions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Senator Malalou.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'll be very brief. I too would like to start by saying a big thank you to Senator Drakes. Crystal, if I might say so, took me under her wing in many respects and gave me some guidance when I was a new senator almost 4 years ago, and she always had a good word for me. I really appreciate that, and I too shall miss her. I will be brief and say welcome back to Senator, my good friend, Monique Tate. Good to see you back. Glad you were reappointed. Now, let me turn to the person who is now my best friend on my left. And welcome, Senator Connell. But I must say that I am the most excited person for you to be here. And you may wonder why. And that is because, you see, sir, that you now are in the firing line and not me. You see, in the seat that you hold there, there's often going to be some comments going to be directed in that general direction. For the last 4 years, as I sat there were times when I felt that I was even coming under friendly fire. So I thank you very much for allowing me to move one step further up. And I'm appreciative. Welcome to you all. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, Senator Malalou. Okay, thank you very much for those comments. Let me also formally place on the record, I did so publicly otherwise, so let me place on the record of the Honourable Senate my thanks to Senator Dr. Crystal Drakes, who made an outstanding contribution during her time here in the Senate. All that has been said is correct in terms of the quality of the presentations. I've been fascinated by her eclectic studies, combination of economics and the environment, which is particularly important for us being a small island that is a large ocean. And for us, the economy and sustainable development is not a fad, it's a way of life. It is, if we don't do it, well, then that's the end of it, end of us. And so I wish Crystal, Senator Drakes, former Senator Drakes, all the very best. Those of you who have not bought the book yet, Beyond the Beach, Conversations on a Blue Economy, wonderful book which you co-authored, which again shows her ability to marry scholarship with everyday communication and tackling issues to everyday people. And I certainly am of view that she's not lost to the public space, and that we will see her in whatever manifestations she may choose to do so on the academic side, public policy side, or otherwise. And I look forward to continuing contact with her and reading her works and gathering her perspectives on sustainable development, where we marry in a judicious way our economic ambitions with the preservation of our environment and our society. So, Senator Drakes, former Senator Drakes, I wish you all of the very best in your future endeavors.
Announcements by Your Honour.
I've received a message from the Honourable the House of Assembly to the Honourable the Senate, and it reads as follows. The Honourable the House of Assembly has the honour to inform the Honourable the Senate that on the 9th day of December 2025, the Honorable the House of Assembly concurred with the Honorable the Senate in committing the following bills: Tourism Accommodation Bill 2025 and Barbados Tourism Product Authority Repeal, Transfer of Assets and Liability Bill 2025 to the Joint Select Committee standing on economic and productive sectors, and that the committee be empowered to consider the principles and merits of the bills and to report no later than 3 months from the date of its reference, dated the 9th day of December 2025, and signed by His Honor Arthur Holder, Speaker of the House of Assembly. I have minutes of our meeting held on Wednesday, 12th of November 2025 for confirmation. Senator Cummins.
Mr. President, I beg to move that the minutes of our meeting held on Wednesday, the 12th of November 2025 be confirmed at this time.
The question is that the minutes of our meeting held on Wednesday, 12th November 2025 be confirmed. Will those honorable senators in favor please say aye? Those against please say no. The things the ayes have it. Those minutes are confirmed. Minutes of Wednesday, the meeting held on Wednesday, 19th November 2025, and the meeting held on Wednesday, the 3rd of December 2025 for deferral. Senator Cummins.
Mr. President, I beg to move that the minutes of our meeting held on Wednesday, the 3rd of December 2025 be deferred at this time.
The question is that the minutes of our meeting on 19th November 2025 and 3rd December 2025 be deferred. Will those honorable senators in favor please say aye? Aye. Those against please say no. I think the ayes have it. Those minutes are accordingly deferred. We have indications of late arrival from Senator Kevin Boyce. Yes. And those are the announcements for today. So, I'm sorry. It's a pleasure to welcome visitors to the Honorable Senate today, Principal Tanya Hardin of the St. Michael School, along with a number of students. I'm advised that the students are Thea Herbert, DeCarrie Barrow, Anya Crystal, pardon is a bad handwriting, Christiane Gamble, Kira Kelman, Jalvin Maynard, and Ramar Corin. Apologies if I got the name slightly wrong. My intention is very, very pure, and it's just my reading skills may not be good. The leader of the House of Government Vincent Senate is urging me to say what school they're from. The St. Michael School. And as one of two representatives here, along with Senator Gregory Nichols, they're loudly welcoming the students of the school. My children went there, but I can't claim any great credit for my children. They've earned their own way there, and they will stand on their own as distinguished alumni. But I want to welcome you all to the Honorable Senate, and I'll make note of these names, and perhaps one of you one day will be senator ahead of these names here. So mark well, decide which of the seats looks most comfy to you, and we look forward to your being that generation which will continue the great traditions of the Honorable Senate. But thank you very much for attending, and we welcome you.
Presentation of petitions, presentation of papers.
Senator Cummings.
Mr. President, I am commanded to lay a number of documents in the Honorable the Senate today. They are as follows: duties, taxes, and other payments exemption, Lisa Scott order of 2025, duties, taxes, and other payments exemption, like you know, Mr. President, Nosandumiana Ayere order 2025, Duties, taxes, and other program payments exemption, Corinne Critchlow, Order 2025. Duties, taxes, and other payments exemption, Watney Woods, Order 2025. Number 132 of 2025, duties, taxes, and other payments exemption, the Maria Holder Memorial Trust Order of 2025. Number 133 of 225, duties, taxes, and other payments exemption, Bethel Senior Citizens Home Order 2025. Duties, taxes, and other payments exemption, Chickmont Foods Limited Order 2025. Number 148 of 2025, duties, taxes, and other payments exemption, Sanitation Service Authority Order of 2025. Number 146 of 2025, duties, taxes, and other payments exemption, Barbados Revenue Authority Order 2025. Number 145 of 2025, duties, taxes, and other payments exemption, Corey Marshall Order 2025. And finally, the audited financial statements of the Barbados Tourism Product Authority for the years 2020 to 2021.
Reports from select committees. Questions to ministers. Request for leave to move the adjournment of the Senate on matters of urgent public importance. Statements by ministers or parliamentary secretaries. Personal explanations. Motions relating to the business or sitting of the Senate and moved by a minister.
Mr. President, I beg to move the suspension of Standing Order 45-2 for the remainder of today's sitting.
The question is, the Standing Order 45-2 be suspended for the remainder of today's sitting. Will those honorable senators in favor please say aye? Aye. Those against please say no. The ayes have it. Suspension, the Standing Order 45-2 is therefore suspended for the remainder of today's sitting.
Introduction of bills.
Senator Cummings.
Mr. President, I beg to move the following bills now be committed for first readings. They are as follows. First reading, Mr. President, of the National Payment System Amendment Bill 2025, to have the first reading of the Central Bank of Barbados Amendment Bill 2025, and the first reading of the Economic Diversification and Growth Fund Bill 2025.
The question is that the National Payment System Amendment Bill 2025, the Central Bank of Barbados Amendment Bill 2025, the Economic Diversification and Growth Fund Bill 2025, be all read a first time. Will those honorable senators in favor please say aye? Aye. Those against please say no. Methinks the ayes have it. Those bills are accordingly read a first time.
Public business, sir.
Public business is now the order of the day.
Mr. President, order number 9. In the name of the Honorary Leader of the Senate, to move the second reading of the Constitution Amendment Bill 2025.
Senator Cummings.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Before I get into the substance of my presentation today, I want also to join with others who have spoken in acknowledging the contribution of Senator Crystal Drakes. Senator Crystal Drakes and I joined the Senate in 2018 together. She, at the time, as it were, she was an opposition senator at the time, and subsequently in 2022, she returned to the Senate also with me, this time as an independent senator. But wherever she sat, whether it was on the opposition bench, opposition side, or on the independent side, she brought a level of substantive contribution to each intervention that she made in this chamber. We had robust discussion, but it always was with mutual respect. Oftentimes, you saw Dr. Drakes, as she became subsequently, then benefit from the absolute support of the members on this side, certainly even on the government side, who recognized not just her sound brain capacity, her intellect, as we would call it, but also her willingness to dig deeply and to provide substantive contributions. And so we celebrated jointly with her, and we slogged along with her in the background, watching her as she worked hard to achieve her PhD, and we celebrated with her once she crossed that milestone. We equally celebrated with her when she published her first book as a part of her University of the West Indies development process. And so I have to stand today, Mr. President, in a substantive moment to say thank you to Senator Dr. Crystal Drakes, as we became so used to calling her affectionately almost, because I remember on the day that she first came to the Senate after achieving her doctorate, I went to the clerks and said to the clerks, you need to change her name because we want to be able to celebrate that she's now Dr. Drakes. And we took great pride in calling her that even before she became a doctor. We don't always agree in this place, but one thing I can tell you, and I think any of us in this place would agree, is that she was never one to disagree and be disagreeable or backgardish or anything of the type. She was always rooting and grounding her disagreements in her belief system and her philosophy, especially as it related to matters of the blue-green economy, for which she became very well known as an opposition senator. And to say that we will very much miss her voice in this honorable chamber is, I think, an apt reflection of her tenure here from 2018 until 2025. We are certainly sad to see her go. We wish that, like many of the others, she had been here with us and had stayed on with us, but we wish her every success in her future endeavors, and we want to congratulate her for a tenure well served. Thank you very much. I have already welcomed our new colleague to this chamber, and I'm very much looking forward to his early contributions. Now, Mr. President, I am also very pleased to welcome the students of the St. Michael's School here today, the students who constitute the leadership of the St. Michael's School Student Council. And I see my colleagues giving me side-eye, Mr. President, but they have the ability to invite whoever they want. They can invite members to join us here in this chamber. And so that they have not done so is a matter for them. But I'm very happy, Mr. President, not just to welcome the Student Council of the St. Michael's School, but the principal who has come with her students and is here in the Senate chamber. Thank you very much. Now, Mr. President, we see a lot of young people a lot of times, and regrettably, we take a lot of pleasure, some people at least, in circulating every fight, every young person who is arrested or alleged to have been involved in something that is problematic. I wish as a people we would take more pride in circulating these exemplary young people who do well every day of the week and share their faces as much as we do those who are problematic. There are more young people in this country doing exemplary things. I know a few of these young people in the Student Council. Two of them in particular I know from before because they have passed through the Model United Nations program that I coordinate on behalf of the Rotary Club of Barbados every year. And there are exemplary young people, and I know that if the other students are members of the Student Council, they too are exemplary young people. And I want to commend them, and like you, Mr. President, urge them, not just here, but when they're going to lunch, pass through the other place, have a peep and see where the seats are, and see if at any point in the future you can see yourself sitting in either chamber of this Parliament representing the people for whom we hope you will soon speak, not just the St. Michael's School, but Barbadians and young voices especially. So welcome to this chamber. And I particularly want to welcome you today on the occasion where we are having a substantive discussion on the future of our Parliament and how it is structured. Now, Mr. President, a few months ago, maybe a few weeks ago, not even months, a few weeks ago, we here in this chamber had a lengthy discussion on the report of the Parliamentary Reform Commission, We looked at the time at the recommendations that had been made, and it was an assessment of the report itself. It did not purport at the time to assess which direction as a country we should or should not go. We looked at the time at the recommendations, recommendation by recommendation by recommendation. We looked and we had an expansive presentation made also by Her Honor, the Deputy President of the Senate, Her Honor, Ms. Elizabeth Thompson. She will be joining us shortly, but she had an opportunity to share her reflections as the Deputy Chair of the Parliamentary Reform Commission. At the time, she took us through what was in the mind of the Commission as they deliberated on the issues before them. She took us through the minority opinions, what was the thinking in some instances. We saw many of the minority opinions also being reflected. We are here today, Mr. President, to begin the long and arduous process of looking at how we can implement some of those reforms. And what is the reform that we are here to deal with today, Mr. President? We have on order number 10, or order number 9 and order number 10, I think it is, two pieces of legislation in particular. And with your permission, I beg to move that we treat to them as a cognate debate. I perhaps ought to have asked that before, Mr. President, so let me revert now, if I can, to treat to orders number 9 and 10 as a cognate debate.
The question is that order number 9, second reading of the Constitutional Amendment Bill 2025 and the second reading of the Parliament Miscellaneous Provisions Bill 2025 be treated as a cognate debate. And for the member, for the benefit of our new member and for those in some hearing of my voice, the measures are voted on individually. However, the debate on the second reading, the policy issues, any matters relating to the two bills are dealt with in one discussion. But we pass order number, we vote on order number 9, then we open number 10 and vote on that separately. And the lead presenter on the bill will naturally need to present the key features of both bills in the lead up of the debate, if it is a cognate debate. So the question is that we treat order number 9, order number 10 as a cognate debate. Will those honorable senators in favor please say aye? Aye. Those against please say no. The things ayes have it. We will therefore treat orders number 9 and 10 as a cognate debate in this second reading. Please proceed, Senator Cummings.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Mr. President, the first bill, order number 9, is a relatively short, but I would normally say in some instances a simple bill, but this is a substantial matter, and so I'm going to take us through the bill. In the first instance, Mr. President, we have at clause 2, the changes that are meant to be made to 45A, and so it speaks to specifically the Speaker and the Deputy Speaker and the amendments being made to the Constitution or proposed to be made to the Constitution. In the first instance, it says that there shall be a Speaker and a Deputy Speaker of the House of Assembly, and for the benefit of our students and our new senator, we usually in this chamber refer to the other place when we refer to the House of Assembly, but I speak to it here because that's how it's listed, that they shall be elected in accordance with the provisions of this section. When the House of Assembly first meets after the dissolution of Parliament, which is usually after an election, and before it proceeds on to the dispatch of any business, this is the customary first order of business of any Parliament, the election of a Speaker of the House. And so whenever the Speaker's space becomes vacant for any reason other than the dissolution of Parliament, the House shall elect such person in that office. And they shall be, by virtue of holding the office of Speaker, be deemed to be a member of the other place, in addition to the 30 members of such greater number of members as may be prescribed by the Parliament. And so you have, in summary, in this section, section 3, here where we're talking about, they shall be deemed in addition to the 30 members to be a member of Parliament. And that simply now makes a substantive shift to move from 30 members of the other place to 31 by having an independent Speaker not drawn from the elected members of Parliament. And I will go through that in greater detail further on. Where there is a division and the votes are equal, the speaker will continue to have a casting vote. But now, unlike in previous incarnations, it is not an even number with 30, but with 31. In the next section, we move on. It says the House of Assembly, when it first meets after the dissolution and before it proceeds, it shall make this election. That person will not be a minister or parliamentary secretary, and so they are meant to be the deputy speaker. And if the deputy speaker's role becomes vacant for any reason other than a dissolution, the parliament shall, as soon as practical, elect another person to that office. And then we have a couple of guardrails. They must be a citizen of Barbados, and they must be qualified. They must be they said they must not have been disqualified for election as a member of the House of Assembly. And we know the circumstances under which a person can be disqualified for election, and equally so, if you are disqualified for election, you cannot be elected to fill the role of the Speaker. And then it goes on to speak about the circumstances under which they must vacate the office. The Speaker must vacate the office when the House first meets after any dissolution of Parliament, where he ceases to become a citizen of Barbados, and where any circumstances arise that would cause him, in this case, the term him is always unisex, and you don't usually find her in the language, and so where it would cause him to be disqualified for election as a member of the House, and where he announces the resignation of his office to the House of Assembly, or by writing under his hand addressed to the Clerk of Parliament. And the same thing in principle applies, but to different layers, to the Deputy Speaker, where he announces the resignation of his office to that other place, or by writing to the Speaker or to the office of the Speaker, and equally to the Clerk of Parliament when he resigns. And then it goes on, Mr. President, to speak about how they can be removed. Again, another instance of putting guardrails in place. The standing orders are made to be pursuant to Section 50 and provide for the removal of the Speaker and Deputy Speaker from office, and they shall no longer be deemed to be a member of the House if they are removed from their offices. Now, I'm going to come back to the second part of the amendment, which allows for ministers to appear in either chamber, but I'm going to park for a moment at the first part of the amendment, which speaks about the Speaker. Now, Mr. President, let's deal first and foremost with the numerical challenge that oftentimes is presented. We've seen in other jurisdictions, Mr. President, where you may have in an even number, even on boards, you typically may have an odd number, and it is for the purpose of being able to always generate a clear majority vote. And so that is very much what is also meant to be intended here, and not to have a scenario where the Speaker has to then, even though he is independent, have a casting vote for one matter or the other by virtue of having a hung decision. And so, Mr. President, that is just as simple as it can get for numerical issues. But here's the other part of it, Mr. President. We in this chamber are constituted as you see us. On the government side, you have members who are appointed by the Prime Minister. On the independent side, you have members who are appointed by the President of Barbados. And on the opposition side, you have members who are appointed by the Leader of the Opposition. And in each instance, Mr. President, we have seen a number of conversations, certainly between 2018 and now, about what that composition should look like. And it is captured in great detail in the report of the Parliamentary Commission. We had an extensive discussion, especially on the independent senators' appointments. Should they come from specifically defined categories? Labor, youth, the diaspora. Should it come from business? What should be represented on the independent side? Should it be assigned to specific institutions? Should it be a rotating membership where you have different categories of persons appointed? That was an extensive discussion in the Parliamentary Reform Commission. And so we had this discussion about how the constitution of the Senate would be. But equally, in the other place, you have persons, all of them, who are drawn from elections. They're representing a constituency, but just like in this place, Each person has a specific voice that they represent. If you represent the government, you represent an independent voice. You typically would hear, Mr. President, persons like Senator Malalou speaking about matters relating to business and real estate, given his experience, and tourism, given his experience. Senator Rogers, we hear him speaking a lot about social issues and what happens at the community level. You've heard references earlier from Senator Tate and her speaking on matters relating to legal matters and the structure of legislation coming here. And in the other place, Mr. President, every person who is there is meant to represent a constituency too, but in this case, one that voted for them. And so the question the government is attempting to navigate is, how does this person who was elected to have a voice on behalf of a constituency base but cannot use that voice at any given time when speaking in Parliament? That person, by virtue of sitting at all times, as long as the Senate is, as long as the other place is in session, they must sit in the Speaker's chair. They cannot at any time speak in Parliament that they were elected to represent a constituency for. They cannot speak on behalf of those constituents. They have to depend on someone else to carry a brief for them. And that, Mr. President, is perhaps one of the most challenging principles that this amendment is attempting to navigate. How do you have a Labour representative, for example, if they were to be so appointed as Labour in the Senate? And if we recall, between 2018 and now, we have had 2 representatives appointed as independent senators from Labour. First, Ms. Toni Moore, who was senator initially, and then we had the subsequent appointment also coming from the Barbados Workers Union. And then we had here, as an opposition senator at the time, but we had Caswell Franklin, who spoke extensively on all matters relating to Labour. How do you have a Labour representative, if they are an independent senator, for example, sitting in the chamber and not able to speak on behalf of Labour? How do you have a constituency representative sitting in the other place and not able to speak on behalf of the constituency that represented them, that elected them? And so, Mr. President, the amendment seeks to regulate that and to address that deficiency. It seeks to give a voice to those who are elected by people to speak on behalf of those people. And so the representative of whichever constituency who elects a person now can have the comfort that when they mount the stairs to enter Parliament, that they are no longer constrained by having to sit in the Speaker's chair and not advocate on their behalf from that posture. And so the proposal, Mr. President, in this first section of the legislation is that the person sitting in the chair must not be a representative of a constituency, and they must have the ability to speak on behalf of the person who was elected, must speak on behalf of their constituents, and the person who sits in the chair must not be elected on behalf of constituents. And so that is the separation that this amendment now brings. Now, this is not an amendment without precedent. The government would not and has not brought anything to this chamber that does not have precedent. Now, where do we find precedent, Mr. President? Now, there are others who will speak during the course of today's discussion, and they will speak about the minority opinion that gave rise to this separation. And there were 2 commissioners who, in the parliamentary report, commission report, spoke about the independent speaker being appointed. You will hear about that in a little bit. But there are other jurisdictions that had these changes. Trinidad and Tobago is one example. And if you look across the Commonwealth, there are also other examples where this has been done. In Commonwealth jurisdictions, for example, you have India, you have South Africa, you have Australia. They have also taken an approach as it relates to the independence of a speaker and having a strong parliamentary background. One of the things that this amendment also calls for is for that person who is appointed as a speaker to have a strong parliamentary background. Mr. President, I was a public officer in a previous life, in an early life, when I was a Foreign Service officer. And there are things that I would not know about the mechanisms of government if I did not work inside of the government service. Equally, I am a government minister now. And there are things that I would not know or would not understand about the workings of government, and things that you cannot say to the public in some instances by virtue of sitting where you sit. And that is not unique to government. Any leadership role positions you where you are always going to be privy to things which you cannot say in the public domain, but you have to be able to find that balance as to how you communicate output versus what the considerations are. And so equally so, Mr. President, we now have a position here where a speaker has to be appointed from those persons who have experience and who understand parliamentary procedures, who understand how the debate will at times be rigorous, but how to manage and to mediate in the middle of that rigor, impartially, fairly, and without appearing in any way to have a bias in favor of any given side. So the importance of parliamentary experience is critical. Public service experience is also critical, and we have seen that, especially in the debate in the other place. So minimum number of years in public service, we expect that persons who are coming in and have that experience, they will bring value to the role of the independent speaker. So this is one matter here, Mr. President. Now, in the minority opinion from Commissioners Thompson and Ishmael, they recommended that you would have a speaker from outside of the Parliament, as I have just described, and that all members of Parliament, as I have said, this is documented in the Parliamentary Reform Commission, and we have Madam Deputy President who is here, and she will speak for herself in that previous role. And so the Cabinet's view, having looked at all of these considerations, looked at these best practices, looked at the report, looked at the actual operation of the other place, felt that this was a direction in which we should go. Equally, Mr. President, and I must point out, we also, when I mentioned that Senator Crystal Drakes and I joined, we're one of the 5 original members of the Senate who would have been here from 2018 throughout. We remember very well what it was like when, in the first instance in 2018, the government side won 30 seats. We remember in 2022, when the government side won 30 seats. And we also remember when a member crossed the floor and constituted the role of leader of the opposition and the various changes that came about as a result. But we also would remember the debate coming from the government side that it was important that there must always be a provision for independent voices in this place in particular, even where it does not exist in the other place by virtue of election. And so the independent speaker also factors into that, where the speaker is going to be elected, especially in circumstances where your numbers are skewed, and we want to be able to preserve the democratic traditions. So, Mr. President, there are a couple of things that I want to say specifically on this. Closer to home, I know I've mentioned other jurisdictions that have these measures in place. In Trinidad, 2002, all of us remember what happened in Trinidad in 2002. It became impossible to govern, impossible to govern. And so the government looked at not just what we have seen happen here. We looked not just in jurisdictions farther afield, but we looked right here closer to home, and we looked at a 2002 case of Trinidad and Tobago. It became impossible for them to actually have a functioning parliament. One side won an equal number of seats as the other one did, and they could find no clear way forward. Equally, Mr. President, they could not elect a speaker, because if they had elected a speaker, it would have meant that one side would have given up a number to help sit on the side either of the government or on the opposition, and they could not move forward. No one wanted to give up that one space because they had an even number of votes on both sides. It became an impossibility, Mr. President. The government here is trying equally to avoid that scenario. So the government has put the measure before us on the table. In another instance, Mr. President, right here in Barbados, even closer to home, we had a circumstance where Barbados we did not have an even number, but we had too close a number here in Barbados, and you had to coordinate with the opposition and the government to figure out how many members in any given sitting could afford to be on vacation or on overseas travel because you couldn't get the House to function otherwise, Mr. President. Barbados has had that own scenario right here at home. And so the government has sought to regulate these discrepancies by having an independent senator, an independent speaker sitting outside of the cut and thrust of political representation. And this, Mr. President, is the matter for the amendment of the Constitution to make this change. But then the government goes on in the second section of this bill, which is what I want to come to now, which is on the attendance of ministers in either place. The right of audience, as you call it. Now, Mr. President, I must tell you, when the Attorney General in particular was presenting on this amendment in the other place, he spoke especially about matters relating to legal issues that arise. We spoke also on Senator Maynard in particular, and now Senator Connell will also have this scenario where medical bills that come to this place, the Minister of Health sits in this place, and he happens to also be, like you, a medical professional. So he not only is managing the bills themselves in terms of the legislative agenda, but he's a practitioner in his own right. And the way in which he can present on those bills may be entirely different than, say, the minister in the Ministry of Health, who is neither a practitioner or the substantive minister can do when it has to go to the other place. And equally with the Office of the Attorney General, here, I believe on all of our sides, we have legal expertise. Senator Nichols is a renowned constitutional expert in his own right, a lecturer, a litigator in his own right, and it has been to the government's advantage to have a litigator and an attorney of his credibility on the government side, and the same with Senator Thompson. But in the absence of legal expertise on the independent side, you have Senator Boyce. If you do not have that legal expertise embedded within you, you have Senator Tate as well. If you do not have that expertise embedded, then it becomes a very difficult conversation because you are not carrying the brief. Neither are you the subject matter expert. And so equally so, Mr. President, this attempts to make sure that when the minister is drawn from either the other place or here, that when bills are being presented in either chamber, the minister has the right of audience. There are very few people who could present a legal bill who are not lawyers. And in my case, Mr. President, if you are not, energy is one of those things where if you are not embedded in it, sitting in it, sleeping with it, breathing with it, everything, every day, it becomes this thing that is abstract and at a distance, and is not something that you necessarily are able to understand, not just the nuances of. And even if you have the benefit of a brief on which you can present, when questions are asked and you have to respond to those questions, you may not have the answers to those questions because you're not immersed in the subject matter. And so equally, Mr. President, what that means is that when bills, and right now on our order paper, there are a number of items that for the benefit of our new member and for our student members here, the order paper would outline effectively what is on the agenda for the Senate and the other place at any given time. We have now the National Payment System that I read a first time earlier, the Central Bank of Barbados Amendment Bill, which I also read earlier, and the Economic Diversification and Growth Fund Bill. These are items that were all presented by the minister in the Ministry of Finance in the other place because they're vested in that ministry. If this amendment had been in place by the time this bill comes here, the minister in the Ministry of Health, whose items these are, would be coming to the Senate, if possible, or if, well, under the circumstances that are outlined in the legislation, to present his own bill and to receive the interrogatories from the other members of the Senate, from the independent side and from the opposition side, so that they can respond in a way that is substantive and to add context and substance to the debate. I am that girl who always wants to be able to have a substantive debate. I do not want to have a debate over commas and full stops. I want to have a substantive debate over the matters before us. And so that's what we're hoping to be able to have with this second part of the amendment. And so the amendment says, a minister who is a member of the other place and a minister who is a senator may attend any sitting of the Senate or the House of Assembly respectively, and may be required at the instance of the President of the Senate or the Speaker in the other place to attend any sitting of the Senate or the House of Assembly respectively. And a minister may not be required to attend any sitting of either House under subsection 1B except on the adoption of the House for a motion for that purpose. And the same thing for the Senate. At the next section, Mr. President. Nothing in this section, however, and I spoke about the Attorney General on purpose, nothing in this section shall preclude the Attorney General from attending any sitting of the Senate or the other place, as the case may be, and taking part in debates and other proceedings and speaking on any motion before any such House, as the case may be, and moving amendments to any motions, even though the matter falls within the portfolio of some other minister. And here is why. How many times in this chamber have we had bills that have come here that amendments have been recommended, and certainly as leader of government business and my colleagues who constitute the cabinet, we may have to be sending messages to the Office of the Attorney General, to the Chief Parliamentary Counsel, to advise them what has been raised by members of the Senate in their legislative right, and then what can be done in response to that. Now, I understand that sometimes, as I started out earlier on this particular point, if you're not sitting in it, what you may be seeing on the outside may be a snapshot of what the big picture actually is. And so you may not always be able to make the changes that you are recommending because there may be more considerations than you are aware of. You may be thinking in a very theoretical way, but there are actually 10 things on the table that you don't see based on what is before you in the amendment or in the proposed amendment. But there's one office through whom nothing can get here. Before they get to cabinet, they must have the certification of the Office of the Attorney General. Before they get here, they must have been signed off on by the Chief Parliamentary Counsel. They must have been reviewed by that office. So there is no pathway to here unless it goes through the several offices that sit under the Office of the Attorney General. If it is a contract of some kind, it must go through the Office of the Solicitor General. And the Solicitor General's office equally sits under the Office of the Attorney General. So whether it's CPC, SC, SSG, all come through the Office of the Attorney General, and most things that come here, not most, everything that comes here from any ministry must have the certificate of the Attorney General. And I know the Attorney General myself is one of that. He will tell me a lot of times, but Lisa, I have to read these bills. I don't rubber stamp these things. I have to sign off on it, so I have to make sure. And so he will see the bill first. And this particular amendment acknowledges that. This acknowledges that the role of the Attorney General is sacrosanct in the process of parliamentary reform. Now, if we recall, imagine by the time we have made all of the other amendments overall that are recommended by the Parliamentary Reform Commission, we'll have a complete suite of amendments. And what do I mean when I say that? Also in the Parliamentary Reform Commission report, there was a recommendation that the Office of the Chief Parliamentary Counsel should now sit under the Parliament of Barbados, whereby everything that is legal will then sit under the Parliament, everything that is legislative will sit under the Parliament of Barbados here, as opposed to where it currently sits. That was one of the recommendations that was made. And so imagine this amendment sitting alongside the additional proposed recommendations coming from the Commission. And so the recommendation then allows for what is called here attendance of ministers in either house, right of audience, and equally, as I mentioned, with the role of the speaker, there are examples of best practices drawn from other jurisdictions, and we have seen that in places like Australia, in Canada, and even in the UK, where a lot of our legislation originated. And so we have, in those instances, we limit the right of audience to things like speaking only, portfolio related matters, time-limited interventions, and it requires, as is in this case, the invitation or concurrence of the presiding officer, except as it relates to the office of the Attorney General. So, Mr. President, these are the amendments that we're covering in order number 9, and I want to draw attention now to the consequential relationship between order number 10. Order number 10, if it is that we are drawing a speaker independently and they're not a member of the elected class, there must be some provisions put in place to allow for them. And what are these changes, Mr. President? We have, in the first instance, the bill is called Retiring Allowances, Legislative Services, and the Senate and House of Assembly Remuneration and Allowances of Members Act 13, Cap 13A. So there are two things that I'm going to cover in this piece of legislation, Mr. President. In the first instance, it allows for the remuneration levels for the independent senator to be set, independent speaker to be set. We know that there is already a remuneration level for the speaker, and it simply transitions that away from being a member of a constituency representative class into an independent speaker. But equally, Mr. President, it then goes into another class, which is on retiring allowances, and it covers under these retiring allowances what would be provided for in their pensions. And so we have in section 2, we have delete the definition of legislator and substitute the following. Legislator meaning a person who is an elected member, they're elected Speaker of the House of Assembly, and not being a person referred to in the above paragraphs, but a holder of a specified legislative office. And then it went on to make these further changes, Mr. President. And then you have here consequential amendments that are covered. Equally so for the Speaker, it speaks about a person who's elected to the Speaker pursuant to the section 45A2 of the Constitution shall be paid such emoluments as Parliament made prescribed pursuant to section 45A7 and enjoy the same conditions of service as elected members of Parliament. So, Mr. President, these are some of the amendments that we are seeing here specifically for the Speaker as we have, as I have outlined in the bills that I have gone over. Now, in my final comment, I just want to give an indication that in preparing for today's debate, I looked at other jurisdictions as I had called them. I looked at what was happening in places like the UK, Australia, Canada, I looked at India, I looked at UK specifically, and where some of the potential opportunities are. And one of the things that we also found across the Commonwealth, more generally, including in the Caribbean, is that Barbados, with these amendments, is on the right policy path. Have we completed all of it? Not yet, but Rome was not built in a day, and we will continue the process. But it is on the right path, and we are hoping that Barbados then, with these changes, and as we continue to make any additional changes, that Barbados will continue to evolve. We have set qualification criteria. We've looked at the security of tenure. We've looked at codifying impartiality. We've looked at what the procedures are for removing those persons, and we have established guardrails on ministerial rights of audience. These are future-proof reforms, Mr. President. This is continuing to evolve a parliament that has not seen any changes in all of our generations, Mr. President. And so have we made all of the changes? No. Let me step right in front of that and say, no, we have not. Will we have to make more changes as we go along and as we continue to consult and engage with the public of Barbados? We must. Equally so, Mr. President, we know that there was a Constitutional Reform Commission, and there was a Constitutional Reform Commission report. And in that Constitutional Reform Commission report, it went back out to the public of Barbados, and we had members in this chamber, Senator Rogers and Senator Nichols, who sat on that committee, and the public of Barbados gave their feedback, and they really wanted us to make some substantive changes as we move forward. How we're going to incorporate those, I'm looking forward to seeing what some of those changes are. But in summary, Mr. President, and as I close on this particular amendment, bringing orders number 9 and 10 together, the appointment of an independent Speaker of Parliament is a future-forward recommendation. The independence of the Speaker and the preservation of the rights of an MP who has been voted for by constituents is a future-forward proposal. Preserving their tenure, Mr. President, and allowing for parliamentary remuneration levels to be set with that independence, that is a future-forward proposal, Mr. President. And allowing for the right of audience for ministers enriches our debate, enhances our contribution to the substantive matters of policy development and legislative reform, and it adds value to the robust debate that already takes place in these honorable chambers, Mr. President. And I'm looking forward to being in a position to respond to any queries that are meant to be raised by colleagues as they make their contributions. But with these few words, Mr. President, I beg to move that this bill is read a second time.
Thank you, Senator Cummings. Senator Warren.
Thank you, Mr. President. And I rise to make my contribution to this debate and dealing with both matters, order number 9 and number 10, and also to acknowledge the students from the St. Michael School, the student council, I believe they are, and welcome them into the Senate chamber. And I hope that they will enjoy, and this will definitely, and we will see some of them at least actively being involved in politics at some time in the future. It's very important to have our young people recognize that they too play a role in what is happening in this country, and their views at this time, even though they may be young, are still critical to the development and the growth of the country. We cannot move forward unless we have the buy-in from the next generation, which is expected to take the mantle and carry this country forward in the future. Mr. President, we are here today to discuss a change to the Constitution and also a change to the governance of most of the other place. While it does impact on this chamber as well, when you look at all of the features of the amendments being made here today, well, likely to be made today to the Constitution. The major component would be for an independent speaker to be put in place in the other place. And the other parts of the component would be to allow for ministers the freedom to move between the two chambers to make presentations on legislation directly coming from their portfolios, and also for the Attorney General, who basically signs off on all legislation which comes before the Parliament, to have that freedom as well to speak in both chambers. In principle, Mr. President, I don't think that Barbados would have an objection to some of these, as the leader of government business would have said, this is done in other places. But when you look at the way, Mr. President, in which it is being done, there are some questions which you have to ask. And there are some questions, Mr. President, which would raise objections. So even though you may agree to it in principle, there may still be some objections to the way how it is being done and how it is being managed. Now, I think Barbadians are quite tired and weary, and this is something that is being said in these chambers, well, not from the other side, but definitely from this side and from the opposition, the fact that we have become a republic since 2021, this is 4 years now, and up to this day, we have not had sight of a republic constitution. And we have heard of well, there was a commission put in place to deal with the new constitution for Barbados. Similarly, there was a commission put in place to deal with reform of the Parliament of Barbados. We had the privilege a few weeks ago of actually having sight of that report and debating that report here in this chamber, and it was also done in the other place. And many of us do accept the majority of the recommendations put forward by that report on parliamentary reform. But I think that Barbadians are becoming wary of this piecemeal approach of amending a constitution which you intend to replace overall. And we may ask the question, what is the difficulty and what is the challenge 4 years after the fact? Some may even say that if you're going to a republic, you should probably have the constitution ready on the same day that you decide to become a republic. Have that constitution ready to sign off and vetted by the people of Barbados and accepted by the people of Barbados. But now we are here today to do a piecemeal approach. Not only changing the constitution, but also taking just a portion of the recommendations which were made in the Parliamentary Reform Commission report and implementing it. And that portion would be for the Speaker of the House of Assembly to be independent. Mr. President, could we not have gone a bit further? Could we not have gone a bit further in terms of holistically looking at the governance structure of this country? Couldn't a government which, on 2 occasions, won the largest mandate ever given to a political party in a country, way over the 2/3 threshold required for changes of the Constitution, not utilize that mandate more effectively and more efficiently to bring about the necessary changes to the Constitution, the necessary changes to our governance structure that they have at their disposal simply because of the mere number of seats which they have in the other place, which certifies that they will definitely have 2/3, more than 2/3 support if all of their members support the necessary changes. But instead, Mr. President, we have witnessed a government, instead of using that mandate, they have from time to time, well, they've used it, but some would say that it has been exploited or abused in the way how it has been used, and not necessarily used to benefit and to take the country forward. Because here we are, the frustration is there amongst Barbadians that theoretically we are a republic, but we don't have a republican constitution. And we know that our governance structure, our governance systems could do with a complete overhaul of the Constitution of Barbados that would take this country forward in terms of governance, Mr. President, and yet still...
Senator Worrell, I hate to interrupt you, but just a note, as we have students here, you're true in all that you said up to a point. Just remember, though, that there's no 2/3 majority in the Senate. So 2/3 majority in the House of Assembly is fine, but there's no government, according to our arrangements, has a 2/3 majority in the Senate. That would automatically ensure that, notwithstanding the size of the majority in the House, that it will not automatically, but, I take the point you're making, but I just want the students not to no senator here ever misleads anyone, not to take the wrong meaning out of it.
Thank you, Mr. President. And I will, your intervention is worthy, and you must be clear in the point that you're making. I did refer, though, to the 2/3 majority in the other place, with the number of seats which they have won the overwhelming mandate, which could necessarily make the changes to the Constitution. And I am certain that once it comes to this place, and it meets the muster, in particular, not only, well, of the independent senators, there's a very strong likelihood that it would be passed, it would be supported, and it would be adopted. But unfortunately, Mr. President, we have not had that sort of appetite from this government to introduce such legislation that would help to bring Barbados forward. I am certain that if some of our prime ministers in the past had that kind of mandate and had that kind of overwhelming support, there would have been sweeping changes to our constitution that we will not have to bother ourselves in terms of, is the parliament functioning correctly? Is there adequate oversight? Is our judicial system functioning correctly? Is our education system fit for purpose? All of these things, Mr. President, and it is not just a matter of the Constitution, Mr. President, but it's also a matter of the legislation which comes to this chamber to be passed. Because thanks for reminding me, some of these things are not in the Constitution. It doesn't just matter about the Constitution, but the legislation as well. You can also be, Barbadians hoped that there would have been integrity legislation on the books of this country that would hold parliamentarians and senior civil servants to account. But to this day, there is none. Barbadians would have hoped that there would have been freedom of information legislation on the statutory books in Barbados, which would allow persons would not have to be guessing at this stage. Persons would not have to be guessing, Mr. President, about what it costs, what was the true cost of Carifesta. The information would be there, Mr. President. They would not have to be guessing and wondering about the $60 million spent on wasted in the whole project. The information and the access would be there. If we had a freedom of information legislation passed in this chamber, well, passed in this parliament by a government which had an overwhelming majority and which also promised to bring that legislation when they campaigned in 2018 and possibly in 2022 as well, Mr. President. I am saying, Mr. President, that when we look at the legislation coming to this parliament, we really have to question the timing and the effective use of the resources. Now, one could ask, what is the rush out of all of the parliamentary reform recommendations for there to bring this legislation, only this particular piece of legislation dealing with the specific appointment of an independent Speaker of the House of Assembly? What was the rush and what is the major change that you're expected to bring about? I heard the Leader of Government Business speak about dealing with the vote in Parliament, and so that in the situation where you currently have 30 sitting members, the independent Speaker would be 31, and you will have an uneven amount, and you wouldn't have a deadlock. But that argument does not always hold. There's a third part of the legislation which I think the Leader of Government Business did not mention in her response, which is the change to the constituency boundaries, the